Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good evening, good afternoon, whatever may be the case. It's Wednesday. I think we're about halfway through the week right now. Tomorrow's Thursday. What do we have on our plate tomorrow? We have jobless claims tomorrow morning. We have Thursday night football. I think the week is pretty much going right as planned. Hopefully, you guys made some money though today. I think today you actually had some pretty good opportunities. I think probably the only slight downfall today was if you really did press into the short this morning, you may or may have not gotten squeezed out of that. That was probably the most trickiest part. But if you stayed patient and you pretty much had, your mindset that you're gonna let the market settle, you probably waited around about 30 minutes to an hour after the opening bell, then you had a pretty good opportunity to chase the upside. And I'm saying chase because you probably could have bought calls at any given point in time about roughly an hour after the market opened. So hopefully you stay patient. But bigger thing is that stay the course. I think right now we are still pretty much in some pretty trendy, want to say territory right now. In which case that it's not certain that we can go to the upside or the downside just yet. I believe tomorrow after we have the jobless claims, and despite the fact that on Friday I believe we also have non-farm payrolls as well. So jobs are really going to be a key component here to really set the tone as we close out the week. And then of course I believe starting into next week, I think a lot more attention is going to be into earnings season more so. All right. El Lobo, ¿qué paso? What's going on, my guy? What have you been up to? Actually, haven't seen you. What trades you've been up to? But good to hear from you, my guy. So I'll get into futures real quick. If there's any tickers you want to take a look at, go ahead and drop it in the comments, and we'll see if we can take a look at those. But like I was kind of mentioning, that we're in a little bit of a tough spot. But again, key levels are pretty much the biggest thing. I think I came to the top of our live here yesterday, and I was talking about the fact that I wanted to see us pretty much respond to this 37.44 level. Obviously, right around that on the hourly here, you have that 200 EMA sitting right at that 37.34 spot. And so that was confluence with the level of support that I was particularly watching at that 37.44. And that's where you got a little tweezer bottom here off of the hourly. So that was one that it was really interesting to see how that ended up giving us such a strong V-shaped recovery intraday. And once we started to claim more than 50% of the first hourly candle of the day, that's when the V-shaped recovery started to really come into play. I think once we also passed that 50% retracement on that first hourly candle, I believe that was the same moment in time that also Avery dropped a little bit of a lotto. For everyone in the chat, I believe it was an SPX lotto that he dropped, and I think some people went for as high about 500% on that. So that was a beautiful reversal that we had. I think that was more so the key for me is that once we got more than the 50% retracement off of that first hourly candle, that's when it gave the signs of the fact that all right, now we're looking for our leading indicators, looking to our bigger names. We had already seen that Tesla was already bleeding out. Microsoft at that point was already down about near $0.4 or so, and then Apple had already been down about $2.5. So you wanted to see those three names lead the way to the upside, and if not, most of them, I believe Apple and Microsoft more so, were actually ending the day green. So that was a positive sign. That was more so what I was gauging towards once I saw that 50% retracement. That's what I wanted to see was our big three mega cap tech names really take us to new heights in terms of that recovery having some kind of meaning towards it. All right. But again, going into tomorrow, we literally wicked our upper trend resistance on this megaphone yet again. You saw the rash little pullback we had in the power hour there. Getting left us a nice little wick to the upside there at that trendline resistance. So I want to see us pretty much take out that 38.20 resistances that I'm watching above our 38.57. I'm also having an anchor view up that's sitting at 38.79. And above that, then we're looking at 39.19, in which case, in relevance to SPY, I think 400 is really going to be in the picture here once we start to push even towards that ES futures here off of 38.79. I believe that's when we're going to really start to talk about the ballpark of SPY going to 400 as in relation to that. All right. Otherwise, downside, and this is where it becomes dicey because I came on live yesterday and I said, all right, we already had a 2 day rally, right? We seen what we did yesterday and also on Monday. I wanted to see the continuation of this if it had any meaning to this rally. Now we're kind of sitting right back into the upper trend resistance of the megaphone. So going into tomorrow, I want to see, okay, now are we going to end up, how much are we going to end up retracing tomorrow? Are we going to see SPY get down again another 3 points? In which case, it may end up meaning that volatility is still here to stay. Or are we going to see us pull down to that, well, I want to say about that 20 EMA sitting right around that 37.81 support I have? And then we see the reversal right back to the upside, taking out today's highs. That would be more meaningful for this rally to have more substance to it, and we see the bigger push to the upside. Otherwise, I do not want to wake up tomorrow morning seeing futures right back down below that 37.81, and then we flirt with a breakdown below 37.54. In which case, that's gonna really tell me that volatility is not yet pretty much out of the picture here. So that's what I'm going to look for tomorrow. It was a little bit more steeper of a pullback that we got this morning. I was looking for more a pullback this morning, but that was more so a bigger pullback than I quite expected. So that was one of the things. But tomorrow, I do not want to wake up to pretty much futures down yet again, and in relation with SPY being down about 3 points, and then we're pretty much flirting with giving back all of today's gains. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna look for tomorrow in futures. Pretty much just touching subject on that. And now I will get into a few of those tickers that you guys mentioned. Herbie, how are you? Christina made some book on VALE. Still holding SLV and PBR. PBR is a bit weak, but there's hope. I'll take a look at it. We'll see some of those names that you actually pointed out. Lobo, let me get to your ticker real quick first. I know that you've been pretty big on EMPH. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe it actually got close enough to that resistance not that long ago. So let's see if I can pull it out to the daily here. Let's see where we are. So I kind of mentioned that if I remember the last time that I spoke about this, and I thought it was actually going to get close enough to that 330 mark. I believe 330 was the range that I was looking to pretty much scale out of the profits, so that way you didn't get caught in such a gnarly wick as you seen it has done previously from dating back to February of 2021 and also November of 2021. But you ended up stopping quite shy of that. 325 looked to have been your relative top. You made a nice little head and shoulders, and that's not relatively good for you. I want to say I do expect this to see a little bit of a retest as you did pull back from the lows today. But that is not a good sign relatively that you have a little bit of a head and shoulders action playing out here. So I'll just quickly outline that. You'll see the nice little head and shoulders. Let's see if I can just get a quick drawing right there. And that way you'll get the little outline that I'm watching. And here goes our right shoulder. So a nice pretty clear head and shoulders action. If you pretty much ended up getting caught in that, I would hate to have heard that. But you had the clear head and shoulders, so if you ended up hopefully identifying that sooner than later, you were able to pretty much get into puts. The only thing is that I would assume that if you got in trying to chase the peak of this right shoulder, I wouldn't assume that you ended up swinging puts on it particularly. That would probably have been my concern. Of course, you would have had to take no meaning for it, the merit for it, knowing that the head and shoulders was going to particularly play out, or you were able to pretty much get in at the open. And I just realized that it was actually down $26. That's a hell of a drop today, 10%. Wow, that is steep. But a nice little support. You hit the 100-day EMA off of the daily here. So obviously you see the snapback. That pretty much makes the case for us pretty much retesting that neckline off of this head and shoulders. That will put you right back up towards 273 roughly is what I'm looking for the retest off of this. Once you end up hitting that 273 mark, this is where you're going to have to decipher upon the broader market, of course. Now, do we end up fading that 273 resistance? In which case, you're going to look to pretty much retest that 100 EMA back down at 254. And then we look for a larger degree breakdown below that 253. Now you can start to look at a little bit of a meaningful support at 220. And that also aligns with your 200-day EMA. Otherwise, flip side of this, and this is where I would probably say be a little patient on it, would say that wait to see if it ends up reclaiming that 273 on the neckline for the head and shoulders, or if in fact you do get the rejection. So don't try to push it too early, trying to force the direction here. Once you get back towards that 273, I would stay a little patient and see how it ends up playing out. If you get the rejection or if you get the reclaim over that key level. All right. EMPH, you got beat up today, so I'm assuming you were in calls and you likely got slaughtered off of that. That's pretty much a shame. And that's why I say, I mean, it would have been hard to really identify the fact of this being a head and shoulders, particularly. Obviously, it reclaimed that 20 EMA off of yesterday's price action. And so, given the fact that it ended up reclaiming that 20 EMA, you probably would have felt the fact that you were just looking to basically break north of 304, 304 half roughly, and you had a shot of taking out that recent high from September 8th. But I can understand if you ended up getting caught in that. So that's why it's a tough one. I mean, hopefully you cut your losses as soon as possible. But that was a gnarly breakdown on that. All right. Held off on MPH long for tomorrow and Friday. So you went long here. Okay, so that makes sense going long here, going into tomorrow and Friday, because that would actually line up with the fact that I'm looking for a retest up towards that 273 mark. So really nice play on your part. All right. Let's actually move on. Let's see what other names there are that I can take a look at. Herbie, you mentioned SOFI. Let's see SOFI. Oh, you're waiting on the EMPH. Okay, then that makes point to what I was actually initially saying then. Wait for that 273 level. I would say just be a little patient. Don't try to force it on yourself. Wait to see how that 273 level reacts. You may not particularly get the play going into the end of the week here, as it's already getting into closer to expiration if you're gonna make a move tomorrow. So if you are gonna make a move on that, I'd probably say go for next week expiration at the very least. And then again, just wait to see how it reacts around that 273 level. All right, but pretty nice setup there. Pretty clear setup that's going on with EMPH there. All right, let's take a look at SoFi. This stock has just been beaten up. It's been brutal. This is another one, a little bit of a head and shoulders action that's taking place here off of the daily. As I outline that for you, Herbie, you see the left shoulder right here. I'll outline the head for you, and I'll also highlight the right shoulder here. I believe that right shoulder, yeah, it's right about here. Let's see if I can just get a cursor. And now you see roughly where that right shoulder is. So you see why it's pretty much a steep decline. You ended up breaking below key support here at that 560 mark. And you had the flush, which might have been new all-time lows on this. Yes, it was new all-time lows on SOFI. So that was a hell of a breakdown. But the good thing is that you ended up snapping back. You see a nice little reclaim off of that 52-week low, if you want to say. In fact, what I would say here, and this is where I would caution, is that I wouldn't necessarily look to take a position on SoFi here. I would particularly wait to see if you can reclaim that 20 EMA. That would more so be my approach. And personally, unless you're looking at shares and you're pretty much looking to hold, and I want to say like down the road past 2022, I wouldn't necessarily say that it's a bad idea to get into shares. At all time lows, if you're an investor, you could add a few shares here and probably not get hurt. Christina, that was actually just the point I was getting to right now. I wouldn't mind, particularly if you're getting into shares here off of this $5 range. I mean, obviously, it feels a little speculative, but you would anticipate at some given point in time that it's going to rebound. But the fact if you're doing options, okay, completely different scenario, okay? Because I'm not gonna necessarily tell you to pretty much get into a falling stock with options here in which there's no merit to say that this is going to reclaim much more within a short period of time holding an options contract. All right, but if you are going pretty much with shares, then obviously you're looking more so towards at least Christmas or beyond this year, and then I would say, yeah, go ahead, take a shot at it, hold some a starter position in some calls. I wouldn't say go all in just yet on those calls. Get a starter position. That way, if you see this ends up breaking below that $5 mark yet again, then you could pretty much look to add to your position. Okay, but bigger picture, then I guess I want to say if we're looking for a short-term kind of play on this, I would look to see at what given point it can reclaim that 20 EMA. You get a move over 5.52 here, then I believe, if I'm not mistaken, the option chain may have some 550 calls on, which will at that point be on the money, and you could ride that up towards that 50 EMA that's sitting at right close enough to $6. That's how I would pretty much look to approach it if you're looking from an options perspective. But like I mentioned with shares, I say you nibble at this, get a starter right now. Look to see if you do get a further pullback on this. Maybe by the end of the week here, you get this back under $5 and you look to add to your position. All right. So that's what I would pretty much say. But just the fact that it's under that 20 EMA still, from an options perspective, I would not look to touch that because there's no merit to say that you're going to end up reclaiming much more than you already have off of that 52-week low. Okay. Let's see what other names that we could take a look at. Christina, you also mentioned VALE. I'll take a peep at it. Let's see some of the names that you actually touch bases on. Wow, that is actually a hell of a recovery off of VALE. Gotta say that was a nice pickup on that one, Christina. That was a really strong pickup. I gotta say, if I actually draw out, you actually have a nice little resistance here. If I kind of just draw out a line here for this, you can actually tell pretty well defined resistance level off of VALE here. This is actually one, of course, and that's kind of in essence to what I said with SOFI. Once you started to reclaim that 20 EMA, that's when things started to get interesting for VALE here, going into the end of last month. That was one that actually does look like it actually had some merit to it. You reclaimed the 20 EMA off of the daily at that $13 mark. You pretty much broke north of that 50 EMA, and then you saw the strong gap up over the downtrend resistance, which at what that point is when you really wanted to actually take a look as far as options go, because now you have a well-defined downtrend break, and you had an opportunity to make a bigger play on this. So now you do see you've also pretty much right into some resistance right off of that 200 EMA, which is going to be rather crucial. So I would anticipate you're going to get a pullback here on VALE. In all seriousness, in terms of a pullback here, I would particularly watch to see if you get a pullback roughly around 14 half. So about maybe a 20-30 cent pullback. Now, if we get a more of a steeper pullback, then I would look for this to pretty much retrace right back down close enough to this 14.16 is what I'm looking at for a bigger, larger degree pullback, and that'll put you right back down towards that 100-day EMA for a retest. All right. So I would say this is a point of where you look for the pullback. If you're in this position, you look to pretty much take your profits here and then wait for that pullback or some better kind of setup to take place on a smaller degree time frame, a little bit of a pattern, some kind of formation to take place in which it presents itself as a buy the dip type of opportunity, and then look to retest that 200 EMA. Otherwise, I don't anticipate you're going to get a full on movement above that 200 EMA already being so close to as a resistance. All right. So that's VALE. Let's see what other names did you actually touch bases on. Let's take a look and see what else. You mentioned SOV. I have not looked at silver in a hot minute, and I think Tom is actually the one that's pretty big on silver, if I remember. And it looks like the last time I actually looked at this, it looks like there was a megaphone in play. So let's see if I can actually kind of draw out this megaphone. And I don't remember exactly drawing out this megaphone, if I'm being honest. But one of the bigger things I could probably say here is that you did have a pretty well defined downtrend resistance that was in play for this. So a little bit of a downtrend resistance, and that's where you actually had a massive gap up. You had an attempt to reclaim the 20 EMA. You got shook out. That was dating back towards September 30th. And then you saw the very strong gap up on this. That was a very convincing gap up. The biggest thing, and this is where obviously where I say, at what point, whatever point you end up breaking a downtrend resistance, you're looking for a key pullback. And so if I end up drawing a line here, you can basically see this was a key level support that you ended up gapping right in above, I want to say. Right at that level, that 18 half, basically. You saw the impulse up that you had, but then you also saw the retest here today. So that was pretty much a significant sign to me. You had an opportunity to get at a support level yet again off of that 1845. I would look to consolidate now above that 100-day EMA. And so it shouldn't go lower than 18.63 here relatively if we do get a little bit of an inside day tomorrow, a consolidation type of day. And then we'll look to see if we can reattempt at breaking this resistance at the 200 EMA. So that's what I would particularly look at. Look to see if you could buy this as low as 18.63 off of silver, and then you may have another run towards that 200 EMA and breaking north of that. In which case, now you're going to start to look at that ballpark number here at that 20 level. And supply that I have is sitting right roughly around that 20 and a quarter mark is what I'm looking at as your overhead supply. All right. But that's a nice one as well. I do like to pick up on that one. Let's see what other names. What else can we go through? You did mention PBR. Let's take a peep at PBR. Let's see what PBR looks like, Christina. Pretty another solid name here, I gotta say. It actually looks has some merit here. I do like this. You had a well-defined little downtrend resistance, I believe, on this one as well. Let's see if we could pick up that downtrend resistance. Let's see. There we go. So you had a nice little downtrend resistance here. You see the strong gap up above that downtrend resistance. And this is particularly what you want to see off of this, Christina. So I do believe that you're going to be fine holding a position on this one because as you see, you had a nice little consolidation type of day here. You held your bottom level support off of yesterday's low. You're getting that consolidation. You are in the middle of a gap fill. Now, this is where I would say be a little bit cautious because now you're going to want to see tomorrow, going into tomorrow, if you do get the push to the upside here on PBR, look to see if you get a hard rejection off of the completion of the gap fill here. That's sitting at that 14.36 mark. That's what you particularly want to see because if you get the hard rejection at 1436, then that's likely going to tell me that you're going to come back down for a full-on retest of that downtrend break, and that's going to put you right back down towards that 13 low. All right. So that's what I would pretty much say about that. But again, look to see if you get a hard rejection, 14.36. If you don't get a hard rejection there, then you should see continuation to the upside, and you should break north well in towards getting close enough to that $15 mark. All right. Let's see what else is on the menu. Let's see what else we got. Let's see. Herbie, you also mentioned DKNG. Let's take a peep at DKNG. I believe I was looking at this not that long ago, actually. Let's see what's going on with this one. Not a bad setup here. I don't think it's a bad setup at all on DKNG. Biggest thing I could probably say right off the bat, you reclaimed over your 50 EMA, you claimed over your 20 EMA, and you are trying to confirm over the 100-day EMA. That'll probably be the biggest picture here that you want to see going into tomorrow. Now, key level that I would say here that I want to see this break north of is breaking north of 1726. That's particularly the big level that I would say, and I would assume then that you're likely not in a position just yet. I would look to see if you can break north of 1726. If you break north of 1726, then I would look particularly at supply sitting at this 18.5. I do think you have a pretty clean shot at breaking north up towards that 18.5. Otherwise, if you get the rejection at 1726, that's when I would be concerned, and you could see a steeper pullback. And when I say steeper pullback, the major concern about that steep pullback would be the gap fill that you have below. Would be my major concern. All right. So 1726, that's the big level, the line in the sand here. Of course, you want to see this confirm. It's showing some life over that 100-day EMA, over 16.58. But if I was pretty much playing this, I would say you look to get in particularly in over the break over 1726, and you have your stop loss set at that 100-day EMA sitting at 16.58. That's how I would go about playing it. All right. In terms of risk reward, that'll probably be the best way I would say in terms of that setup. All right. Let's see if there's anything else. Herbie already covered you. Jahan, you mentioned semis, AMD, and NVDA. I'll pretty much dive into the semis. We'll see what's going on. Christina, you're welcome. SOV and PBR, it really helps. I'm holding 1021 calls on both. 19 on silver, 15 on PBR. I appreciate the review. Uh, One of the biggest things I would probably actually commend you on, Christine, is the fact that you did not do weeklies on that. The fact that you went out towards 1021 expiration was probably the best thing that you probably could have done for yourself. And this is pretty much more so, I want to say a little bit of a degen type of move, especially those that get a little bit desperate. Maybe you have small portfolio size and you're looking for explosive moves, in which case you actually think about the fact that you're going to get a bigger move, bigger gains off a weekly expiration. That's where you get hurt. That's what typically where you get burned. And I'm saying that from experience. All right. So that was a pretty good thing on your part of going out towards October 21st. So commend you on that, doing that for yourself. All right. Jahan, let me get into the semis real quick. Let's see what's going on with the semis. I think I was pretty big on AMD. That was one of the names that I was particularly watching today. I was actually more so watching for the downside though. That did not necessarily take place today. I was actually looking for the fact that a very key level, and this is why levels are so important. I was actually particularly watching the 6540 level on AMD today. That was actually one of the things that I was keeping an eye on. Now, my mindset here when I was actually looking at this trade this morning, and I didn't get a position on AMD this morning, but I was watching for this to come down towards 6431. That was support of this trend line support. That was 6431. And I wanted to see the bounce and retest of 6540 for resistance and then the breakdown, being that this is a bearish pattern. That was not necessarily the case, and this pretty much goes in conjunction with how the market had a nice V-shaped recovery. We ended up retracing basically more than 50% of our initial hourly candle at the opening bell. That's the same thing that ended up happening on the video. So once I was able to identify the fact that we reclaimed over 65.40 on AMD, and that was the key level that I was watching. That's when I pretty much took a step back and I stayed away from the trade, particularly, and I went more so for SPY, being the fact that we ended up retracing more than 50% right out the gate out of the first hourly candle. Now I'm looking for the bigger picture, looking for the bigger V-shaped recovery, and I avoided looking at any kind of position on AMD. But I will say though, we did end up going right into pretty much relative resistance, as you basically see dating back towards the third week of September, towards the end of September here. You actually hit your head on this resistance here, roughly around that 67.78 mark, and that was a resistance level that you hit your head on multiple times, as you got quite a bit of a consolidation. You could say distribution before you had the leg down to finish the end of September. Now I particularly want to see, do we end up breaking north of 69 here? In which case, that over 69, that's going to put you right at that 100-day EMA on the hourly here at 70.02. And then I was going to look for the larger degree move up towards 72.80 is my next level of resistance. So I think bigger picture here more so, and I don't want to get wicked out particularly. I would look to see if we get the break north to 69, and I would look for entry over 70.02, in which case that's going to set me up for about a near $3 move into my bigger resistance level at 72.80. That's how I personally would go about playing it, because I don't think there's much room between the level that you are right now and then getting wicked out, particularly at the resistance of 68.79, or close enough towards that 100-day EMA, and then you get pretty much wicked out and you're left holding it back. All right. So that's how I would go about playing it. Otherwise, if you're looking for the downside here, particularly just looking at both directions here, obviously the bigger thing is that I want to see is pretty much a high and tight consolidation is what I would say. And I want to see that hold above 67 flat, which is your 20-day EMA. If we can pretty much get a nice little consolidation here at that 67 level, we find a nice base above the 20 EMA, then maybe I'd probably say look for an early entry, particularly if we get the consolidation here. And that'll be the factor of where I say tomorrow I want to see if volatility kind of gives a little bit of a calm off of a 2-day rally, having a V-shaped recovery. Do we see the volatility kind of calm down again going into tomorrow? We start to see more consolidation, or do we end up getting a breakdown? In which case, you'll see this flush under 20 EMA. All right. Christina, you could have made money shorting AMD in the morning and then going long with it. That was actually one of the bigger things I was mentioning this morning, and I actually mentioned that when I was on live. I was actually talking about the fact that I think it was roughly around close enough to $66, right around the opening bell is when I was talking about AMD. And I actually mentioned the fact that you could take the morning breakdown towards 65, 64.31. Otherwise, I was particularly looking for the larger degree breakdown, in which case you'll get the retest of 65.40, and then I would see it break the trendline support. That was not particularly the case. And that's why you see, I mean, I still have everything outlined from when I was looking at. I wanted the retest of 65.40 to get into the short and then break down, because the little yellow to red shaded area here is actually a larger degree gap fill. Off of the 4 hour, I think it's more noticeable, and that'll take it down towards 62 low. That's what more so is I wanted to play. I wanted to get in at 65.40, and that was about a near $3 move to the downside, particularly is what I was watching for with a larger degree move. I didn't want to end up forcing it down to 64.30 and then getting caught in the bounce and then seeing the flush after the fact. That's why it's all about game plan and just particularly knowing your levels and knowing if that's going to end up being a retest or if it's going to be reclaimed. All right. So that was AMD. The other one that you mentioned for you, Jahan, was NVDA. This one I have not looked at too much. Let's see what I actually have outlined. So here I actually have outlined a little falling wedge action that took place. You have a nice little falling wedge. Once you started to basically reclaim your 20 EMA here, that was actually a really good sign. You saw the strong gap up. That's pretty much in conjunction with the 2-day rally we had so far. But now going into today, and this is where it would have been a little bit tricky per se. You would have to know the broader market perspective of the V-shaped recovery taking place. You basically attempted to break below the 50 EMA and the 20 EMA on this morning's little dump. But once you started to reclaim that 20 EMA, that's the point of figure where you ideally want to take a starter position. The key level here would have been holding above 127.42 and taking your entry above that 127, that above 128. All right, and then you would have saw your full-on breakout once you were able to claim over the 100-day EMA, sitting at 129.46, and the rest was particularly this gap fill that's sitting here. As you would have saw, you would have completed the gap fill at 132 half. So that was a beautiful move. Now, of course, kind of goes with the same sentiment that I was saying for maybe about the past two, three tickers here. As we're sitting so high, you want to see a little bit of a consolidation. Maybe you see a little bit of a pullback. And here's actually one interesting thing that actually stands out, particularly with how NVIDIA setup is. You may see a little bit of an inverted head and shoulders actually play out here if this were to take place. So you see the left shoulder. I'm going to outline the head, and then you could possibly see a right shoulder. If you do in fact pull back to the 100 EMA and also confluence with the 20 EMA, you could see this particularly pull back, and that'll put you right back down towards 129 half to 129 low, and then you should see the breakout right back above the neckline. So this actually is an intriguing one going into tomorrow. I would look for that pullback. If we can get this right back down towards 129 half, 129 low tomorrow, that actually may present itself as another buy the dip type of opportunity intraday. And we should see this get a strong impulse, at least making its way up to at least test that 200-day EMA at some given point, whether it be into the end of the week or next week. But 137.29 may particularly end up being that target more so to test as a resistance for that 200 EMA. That if you've seen basically since the end of August, we have not even been anywhere close to that 200-day EMA. So as we're curling up now, it would make sense to retest that, even though it's going to end up likely being a resistance. We'll see the rejection on the first attempt, and then we'll see if we can get a nice consolidation right under that 200-day EMA. All right. So that's what I would say about that one. Otherwise, I could probably conclude right there. I think that's quite a few names that we kind of touch basis on. Again, bigger picture, 2-day rally. We already saw a nice little dip and rip type of scenario. I think today was a healthy pullback to give us that impulse, that V-shaped recovery that we had today. But I want to see if we get a consolidation type of day. And that would give me more merit to say that, okay, one, volatility is continuing to calm down. We already had days where SPY was up 7 points, SPY was down 3 points, and now recovering yet again. Do we see some kind of consolidation, a little bit of a calm towards how much the market has actually been moving in either direction? And then that gives a base for the next leg higher, at least in going into the Friday or going into the beginning of next week. All right. But other than that, I think I will leave it as that. Chris, I love appreciate you guys as always. I will leave today's segment as that. But as always, appreciate you guys joining. You guys all have a great evening. Again, tomorrow's going to be, by the way, we're going to have jobless claims tomorrow morning. The other thing to pretty much quickly highlight so you're aware, I believe Mester's going to be speaking twice tomorrow. I need to confirm that tomorrow morning. But according to the economic data that, well, economic calendar I'm looking at, Mester's going to be speaking tomorrow morning at 8:50 a.m. Eastern. So that's going to be something I'm going to watch for. That's pre-market basically. So we're going to see how the market reacts to any kind of comments, any market outlook that's being said. And then we also do have a new Fed governor speaker, Lisa Cook. She's going to be delivering her first speech as governor. And then this is what I want to see is apparently Mester's going to be speaking again tomorrow at 6:30 Eastern p.m. tomorrow. That's going to be, I need to double check. So I will probably confirm that tomorrow morning. All right. But otherwise, again, appreciate